if not more challenging. So tell us a little bit about your week.
Definitely, yeah, it's definitely equally, if not more, challenging. Thankfully, that is kind of where my background is.
Yeah,
I
that's
grew
cool.
up on the studio side of things. My dad is in independent film distribution, and I grew up working at his companies right out of high school, and working in marketing and acquisition. So thankfully, it was kind of in my wheelhouse to bootstrap. I call it guerrilla marketing.
Hmm.
Bootstrapping. Coverage, earned media. And so it is weird because it's so much different than the creative side of filmmaking. But I always say, like, it's it's almost equally creative, just in a much different way. Because I joke, when I do the more business side of things, like with my dad, I joke, like, oh, I'm becoming a suit, like, but it's really, there is a lot of creative things to being a suit as well. And the marketing of movies, I think, is very fascinating. And it's weird working on one of my own. Usually I work on the marketing for our Briarcliff movies that
Right.
are not starring myself, so it definitely is a whole different animal, but it's been a really fun process.
Yeah. So how's the reception been? I know you've been doing some Q&As and
Yeah,
discussions and
it's
stuff
been
like that. How
great.
people
I
seem
think.
to yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just asking
I think.
how people have received your movie so far.
Ask me week. I think that there would be a lot more reception out there, just because the theatrical release that we did this past Friday was there isn't limited. It's just LA, New
Yeah.
York, DC, and a few other markets. I think that the rest of the world and much more people are actually going to see the film starting this Friday, when it is digital plug, when it is out on all streaming platforms. But
Mhm.
the reception that we've gotten so far has been really, really positive. It's been really gratifying to see at the Q&A in New York and the Q&A in LA. We had packed houses at the Regal Union Square in New York and at the Lemley Monica, which is actually my first job, was selling popcorn at the Lemley Monica when I was 15. So that
Really?
was yeah, it was a nice little homecoming. It was a very sentimental night. The response has been really positive. I've been heartened by the fact that I knew that, to a certain extent, at least, the film resonates with young people, and obviously it's geared towards them. But it's been gratifying to see, we've had some grandmas and grandpas in a couple of these screenings who have, come away really touched. And to me, that's actually been the most gratifying thing, because I feel like there's a little bit of something, it's obviously, again, I understand that it's probably not your, go-to genre or whatever, on the
Sure.
channel. I feel like, it'd be very easy to watch the trailer and to pigeonhole us as a YA romance movie, aka something that should only appeal to teenage girls.
Right.
Obviously, I'm biased, but in my view as a writer and writer, and I still think that, just putting on my studio hat for a second here, clearly that is our target demo from a marketing perspective, 100% our target demo. I do feel like there is a little something in there for everybody, and to me, it's much more than just a young love story, and we can get into it. But I
Yeah.
think that it's pretty unique within the genre, because, as you saw, it's not just a makeout fest. I like to say, like, we
Yeah.
I don't even think we kissed until over an hour and 10 minutes or something like that into the movie. And so we wanted to do a quote unquote young love story that was not just a sappy, two hot kids just steaming this. There's no sex scene. There's none of that. So I think within this genre of romance movies, I think it has broad appeal.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. One of the aspects I actually enjoyed about the movie was that I think it's an adult story, but you told it kind of in a light way. Like I know that you had a bone to pick with me about saying the Instagram filter, but what I meant by that was that it's actually, one of my big issues with so many movies nowadays is there's just a nihilistic feeling to movies, and they're so dark and hard to see. But everything in this movie was, yes, it's the end of the world essentially, but you guys weren't down by it. There wasn't this nihilistic push. It wasn't like everything's hopeless. You found hope in a hopeless time, I guess, is a good way to put it. And what I enjoyed about it was how warm everything looked. It was, you came across some shady characters in the movie, but it wasn't like everybody was evil. Not everybody was out to get you. There was actually some good people left. So yeah, that was one of the things
That's
I
so
actually
funny.
really
I'm
enjoyed
glad
about
that
the
you
movie.
I'm glad that you clarified that. Yes, because I think people of my generation, it's like when we hear somebody say like Instagram, it's like we automatically take it as an insult. I was like, oh man, because I totally agree. 'Cause I think, I'd be the first to tell you there's plenty of, flaws with the movie. I could critique it to
Sure.
death. I
We're our own
think,
worst critic, right?
yes, exactly. I think that one of the few things that you can objectively say about it is that our DP, our cinematographer, Rachel Kleiman, absolutely knocked it out of the park and has totally outkicked our coverage in terms of the aesthetic. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I have a lot of criticisms of most modern movies. Like, I'm not technically savvy enough to quite articulate, but to me, like I call it, it feels flat. Whereas, I think in our film, like you said, I don't know if it's even bright or yes, it's warmth. It's warmth and richness. And I think that there's a richness, a texture. Rachel. That's why the reason I objected to the Instagram thing was because, again, in my mind, I'm like, Instagram, I'm like, that just means that it's super modern. Like, oh, that's like a euphemism for like it's 2025. And what I actually think is cool about the look of our movie is we use these vintage lenses, which give it that rich, warm feel. Which I guess it's probably akin to a retro filter on Instagram or something. When I heard that, I was like, oh, I thought you meant modern, and I feel like our look is pretty retro, which is one of the things that I like about it very much.
Yeah, me too. So take me through a little bit of your creative process. What inspired you to write this movie, and did you always want to be in it, or were you just kind of coming up with the idea, and then eventually you're like, you know what, I think I could actually play this role?
I did, because the idea was actually originally supposed to be a short film for me and the girl June Schreiner who plays Rose in the movie.
She was great.
She's amazing. She's the best actress I know. We went to the same acting studio in Los Angeles, and actually we weren't even in the same class, but we were in the same Eisner program there. And I see her around the hallway, and she was the star pupil of the acting studio. So I knew I wanted to work with her. And this thing was conceived of as like, oh, this would be a fun little short film to make together in our spare time. Get some good footage of ourselves to use on our reels, because we were both all in on the day-to-day acting grind at that stage. Now I've kind of put that on the back burner and more into filmmaking rather than being an actor for hire. At the time, that was the plan, and then I just ended up writing it and having so much to say, and it kind of snowballed into a feature. And the genesis of it was always, I love end of the world movies. I love post-apocalyptic and pre-apocalyptic fiction. I feel like it's a very interesting lens to view humanity through an extinction event. I always say, what is the only thing that can make an Instagram influencer in Beverly Hills experience the exact same thing at the exact same time as a potato farmer in the Irish countryside? It is an extinction event. It's the one thing that would truly throw everything out the window: wealth, status, jobs. None of it would matter. We would all be on this equal playing field for whatever period of time. So I think it's a very interesting lens, and my view was that every end of the world movie, many of which I love, are all backwards facing. It's always a middle-aged man and his son, like The Road, which I love, or Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, which I also love. Steve Carell, he's looking back, wishing he told his high school sweetheart he loved her, and it's always very backwards. Like, what did we wish we had done in the past? We wanted to make an end of the world movie that was forward-facing, and it's about how these two young kids. It's not what they've done in the past. We don't really get into much of their backstory or anything. It's about how they're about to be robbed of their futures. That's why you hear him say in the movie, "Oh, I never left the country." It's about all these things we didn't get to do, rather than things that we did and wished we had done differently or whatever.
Yeah. No, I actually, that was, I think, one of my critiques about the movie. I actually really enjoyed that you kind of just threw us in the middle of the story. It's like we kind of just were hitchhiking along, and then we came in middle of the story. You touch on there's a little bit of exposition in the movie, but there wasn't much, and I didn't think it was really necessary. But yeah, that was kind of one of the things that I really enjoyed about the movie.
Thank you. And it's funny you say that, yes, because it goes to just how subjective taste is and everything. Because that's me personally, I couldn't agree more that, obviously I wrote it, and so I very intentionally, to me, because to me it's not interesting like what they were up to. Like, it's neither here nor there. But other people, disagree. I definitely have heard from some people who are like, oh man, I wish we knew more about what Rose and Michael were up to before all this started. My personal just taste in storytelling is I love to just kind of hint at it, sprinkle in things, but it's purposefully untied loose ends in the sense of, I think it's cool to leave some stuff up to interpretation. And the whole movie is essentially an examination, are these kids really soulmates? Or is it a matter of circumstance? Did they just kind of pair up because the world's ending in a week? Right. Or the girl even says in the movie at one point, do you think we would have ended up together anyways if none of this had ever happened? And so I think that's kind of the central question of the movie. And to me, not knowing everything about what their lives were before, this week started kind of makes that question even more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the questions I had, and this isn't a spoiler, maybe it just went by me and I blinked and missed it, but I didn't really understand why Michael wasn't able to meet her family, go with her after all the stuff you guys been. That wasn't super clear to me, so I was wondering if you could clear that up a little bit.
Totally. I definitely can. I'm trying to think if I can clear it out.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's going to watch it, but that was the only.
Well, yes, I guess
that was really the only thread where I was like, I don't really understand why he can't go with her right now. Wasn't.
And she even says, he feels like they would not want to see him right now because without giving anything away, there is one very dramatic moment from their past that we do reveal at some point in the movie.
Okay.
And his feeling is that in the wake of that and his feeling is because, what we do establish is that they both left their respective families and hit the road together when this all started. And his feeling is that her parents would feel like he had stolen her away from them for the end, and that they wouldn't want him then come into their house for them.
Yeah, that makes more sense now. Well, cool. Well, so when you were writing this movie, how did everything kind of manifest? How did you just say, "Oh, this isn't a short story anymore," and how'd you get people behind it? And then you got some pretty decent star power in there, and they didn't overwhelm the movie, which I like. I like that about it. Usually in movies, when you have a cameo, it's very much, "Hey, I'm Lauren Cohen. This is my time to shine." She just was another character that you passed along the way to your destination. So I thought that was cool. I mean, obviously sprinkling that in helps get eyeballs on the film, which I hope more people see it. But I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a lot of thoughts, and I'll get into how we ended up with them too. But
I got plenty of time, man.
Lauren and Dermot both. Part of what I think is very interesting about this movie is that their characters in this movie are both very different from the characters that they usually play. Like you said, it's like sometimes a big star can be overwhelming, but I think in this movie in particular, Lauren's character is so vulnerable and soft and tender, whereas she's known for, most known for The Walking Dead and for playing these like badass,
super
chicks, kicking ass, and taking names, and then she's this very, very, very vulnerable, kind of shy, soft-spoken role in this movie. And then the same thing with Dermot. Dermot obviously cut his teeth in rom-coms, being this leading man, of being, the groom in My Best Friend's Wedding and all of this. And nowadays he's kind of often like the sexy dad. He's like the dilf and all of that. And in this movie, he is, dirt on his face, drifter, tattered clothes. I think it's pretty, different from most of his other work, which I think is, to your point, maybe why, it doesn't come across as like, hey, I'm Dermot Mulroney, or hey, I'm Lauren Cohan, because I think it is pretty different than what they have been most known for. In terms of putting it all together, it started as a short film, and then I ended up with nothing because I wrote a 57-page featurette. So it was neither a short story, and I was like, God damn it, well, I wrote a way too long short film that's also not a feature film. But so then at that point, it was pretty obvious what I had to do rather than trying to trim a 57-page featurette down to a short film. It was, at that point, it was much more logical to continue fleshing it out and to make it into a real feature script. I sent the 57-page version to the guy, Andrew Johnson, who ended up directing it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I read the 57-page version on my own. I sent that to him, and that's when we really locked in and started working together. And he came on as the director, and then we, fleshed it out into a feature together. And then, like any independent film, it was a slog to get made. I wrote it in started writing it in early 2020. Here we are in 2025.
Oh, wow. So it was like a COVID event kind of inspired it, huh?
Yeah, well, that's what's so funny is everyone always thinks that, and I'm sure that it did. It would have been impossible for it not to have subliminally or subconsciously. I did not write it as a COVID allegory, but there definitely are, similarities in the movie. There's a lockdown from the National Guard, so the streets are kind of empty. It feels like those early COVID days. But whether or not COVID actually influenced the material, it 1,000% from a filmmaking perspective, it gave me the time to, I was working a day job. Like I everything ground to a halt, and COVID is what gave me the, wait, hold on. Sorry, I was just, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I got you.
I was realizing, yeah, I was hearing an echo. I hope you weren't hearing an echo. That was my phone. I think I had
No, you're
connected
good.
my phone simultaneously. Um, Sorry, I fleshed out the 57-page version in 2020, beginning of COVID. It gave me the time to actually pursue something like that. I finished the 57-page version late 2020. Then me and Andrew Johnson, we spent most of 2021 fleshing that out into the feature. I'm a pretty slow writer personally. And then finally, in the end of 2021, is when we started to get some momentum. You know, we had made our lookbook, we had started sending it to actors, and started sending it to some financiers. And I'm very lucky, as I alluded to, having the studio background. That's actually the part of the business that I am, one, most well connected in, and two, most well know how to navigate. Physical production, I didn't know the first freaking thing about, as I would come to find out on this film. And there's a lot of naive things that I did. You know, we did 20 locations in 19 days. We're this sprawling road trip movie, even though we have a low budget, because I didn't realize that that was an insane thing to do. And I'm actually grateful for my own naivete in that way, because if I had known how insane of a logistical thing to do that was, we never would have attempted it. And I'm really glad that we did. And I think that actually gets to some of the state of independent filmmaking. I do think there's a misconception out there that if you are a low budget or independent film, that you have to be super contained. And like, oh, if you're doing a low budget indie film, like you've got to be a single location horror film. Like it's got to be a home invasion thriller that all takes place in one location. Obviously, yes, you can stretch a dollar a little more doing it that way, but I don't think it's an absolute. And people talk about it like it's an absolute. Like if you have a low budget, like you have to be contained. And I hope that we showed with this movie that you can be relatively low budget and independent and still have some scope and still be sprawling if you have a team of very hardworking, dedicated crew who are down to do those logistically difficult things and are down to load in and load out of a new location each day. And if everybody's down to work at a breakneck pace, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
If I had known what I know now, I don't think I would have attempted it, but I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then,
I'm sure that was a
go
big
ahead.
experience for you. I was.
Oh my God, yeah, no, it was very eye-opening, and now I have since produced another feature film since, so I now feel like I know physical production a lot more, and I can't understate it enough how I knew nothing. I had worked as an actor, like I said, me and June, we came up as actors. I had acted in plenty of things, and it's so night and day to be an actor for hire, where you show up and you do your work, and you're like, see you guys in 2 years, hope it turns out well, you know, do your thing, versus living and breathing and being responsible for every little little thing on this symphony. And so I really had no clue what I was doing from a physical production standpoint. I was making every rookie mistake in the book in many ways, you know, adding pages right up until we're shooting. You know, I'm like, 110 pages in 19 days. I'm like, that sounds reasonable to me. You know, I was 6 pages a day. That doesn't sound that bad. I'm like, come to find out that, you know, on big budget movies, they're shooting a freaking eighth of a page a day. Like,
Yep.
so I'm very grateful for my naivety. And then as it relates to the Lauren and Dermot of it all, Dermot, we were super lucky in the sense that my dad has known Dermot for a long time. I know Dermot's son. Dermot's son, Clyde Mulroney, actually was a part of our crew. He was a key crew member for us. So that was super easy to get Dermot the script, you know, and he thankfully responded to it and thought it sounded fun. And Lauren was the complete opposite, though. We had no connection to her whatsoever. We just got also lucky, but in a different way. A different actress was originally going to play Julia
Oh, wow.
and had to
You able
drop
say
out.
Who or no?
I'm sorry?
Are you able to say who or no?
I don't know. I'll text you. I don't want to on air just in case I'm not supposed to. But I'm sure. But it's a very esteemed, good actress. She would have been phenomenal as well. Much different than Lauren. She unfortunately had to drop out. She was going to be in Europe the whole summer. Her manager was a guy named John Carradino. John was a big fan of the script, and he suggested it to us. He was like, "You know who might like this?" He was like, he also represented Lauren. He was like, "You know who might like this? This Lauren Cohen. I'm about to see her next week. Let me show it to her." And we were, "Oh, please, please, please." He was like, "Oh, be okay." And I'm like, "Please, please do." And so he did, and she responded to it. She hopped on a Zoom with our director, and the next thing we knew, she was attached, and we kind of couldn't believe it. It was a coup for us. And to your point, they're not in the movie a ton, you know, duration-wise, probably, you know, 10 to 12 minutes each of them. I think that, and I'm not just saying this, like I generally think that their characters are the and a couple of the other random randos that we encounter as well are the heart of the movie, or the ethos of the movie. I always joke me and June are like the meat and potatoes, you know, but I think that they are the, you know, the dressing that actually give it the flavor and the seasoning. And I think because the whole movie is trying to be the ordinary within the extraordinary.
Right.
Like, there's been a million end of the world movies about the sci-fi of it all, about the team of scientists rushing to try to stop the asteroids and deflect it, and that's been done. So we wanted to just do I always, again, not that we could ever dream of reaching his level, but my dream was to make What If Richard Linklater made an end of the world movie. You know,
Okay.
it's really just about like a slice of life, regular people. And so I think Lauren and Jeremy's characters are, in a nutshell, they're both very weird in their own way, you know, and they're very human. And what we wanted to do was just show that, like, with the whole movie, like, the ethos is good people do bad people do good things. Things are not black and white. They don't fit into neat cookie cutter boxes. And that's why with Lauren's character, she says some kooky things. She says a few things that are going to make you look at her sideways and be like, geez, this lady doesn't have her stuff together. Like, you know, you'd probably be pretty judgmental watching Lauren's character for a little bit. And then there's a pretty big reveal, and you find out that, oh, Lauren's actually done something extremely selfless and something that's just truly remarkable. And that, to me, that is how actual humans are in real life. We are flawed, and one of the weirdest people you know might do one of the most brilliant things you've ever seen, and vice versa. And so I think their characters, despite not being in it, the whole movie really are the tone and the heart of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. She one of the things I liked was there was nuance. So, like, you gave the characters a surprising amount of depth with what little time that they needed to, like you were saying, Lauren's character. One of the things I was curious about was, you know, since you're the writer and the lead actor, did your perspective on the character of Michael like really evolve from when you wrote it to when you filmed it? And was there any like challenges in bringing that to life? Was he like a different character when you wrote it, and then, you know, by the time you were shooting it, was it?
It's a good question. I don't think it evolved too much, just because I did write it in my own voice, and it is funny. Like, I guess I'm just a weird person, but to me, that was one of the least weird parts of the process. Everybody always says that, and I totally get it. I would have been the same as well. Everybody's always like, "Oh man, it must have been so weird, like, you know, watching yourself and like writing your material." I guess it's probably just having, you know, come up as an actor and done a million self tapes. I'm used to having to watch myself back and have to edit myself, you know, in iMovie to send it into an audition. I guess I'm just numb to it, because because for whatever reason, that part was never weird to me. I was much more, you know, worried about a million other things. I became obsessed with the minutia, you know. That's why I said I had no physical production background, but I came out of it obsessed. Like, I'm an obsessive sound nerd now. And it's funny because I came up as an actor, and I came out like, I'm like, my performance as Michael, you know, it's like was never even weighing on me that much. I was so obsessed with the granular and the technical of it all, and I thankfully was able to just be pretty detached and not view it as like, oh, Andrew, am playing this character that I wrote. I was able to just kind of, I think, just kind of fall into it and relax.
Yeah,
which is great because I was not relaxed about everything else. But for whatever reason, again, you would think that that would be the thing I would be least relaxed about. That was the most relaxing part. I felt comfortable because I did write it in that voice, so I felt comfortable.
Yeah, totally. And so the film kind of explores, you know, finding connection and chaos, you know, connection in the face of certain doom. What do you think people are taking away from Michael and Rose's journey? I'm sure you've heard a million different perspectives on that. You know, I come at it with a certain perspective, but I'm curious, you know, from your point of view.
I'm curious to hear yours. Yes, I have heard a lot of sentiments. One of the most common ones is one of the more expected ones. It's not breaking new ground, but it's you know, people come out of it saying that it makes me want to call my parents and tell them that I love them, you know, and it's actually really sweet, bittersweet, because one of the more special parts of the movie, I can't remember if I mentioned this, I don't think so, but the actress who plays the grandma in the movie, and the whole movie it starts with, we're on the road, we're on the run, the world's ending, and the girl says, I want to go see my grandma.
Right,
and the
she's
road
kind of the MacGuffin of the movie, essentially.
Yes, it's like the North Star, you know, is like we are journeying to grandma's house. We finally get there. The grandma is played by Dana Anderson, who is June's mom.
Oh,
So
really?
Jude's mom plays her grandma in the movie. And Dana, she was a very accomplished actress. She was in the original Karate Kid. She was in Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman. She very accomplished actress. Unfortunately, this is her last role because she passed away before we could finish the film.
Oh no.
So yeah, it's this tragic thing, but also this in the movie is dedicated in her honor now. If you see in the credits, in loving memory of Dana Anderson, and at the same, it's heartbreaking and tragic, but it's also really beautiful and powerful that the kind of the whole you could reduce the movie the ethos to call your mom, and that's what June always says, call your mom, and I think that that really kind of helps capture what I hope people take away from it, because I know it's especially meaningful to June. Obviously, her and her mom got to do this last thing together, and so I think it's really just that it's relationships is what I hope people take away from it, but not just immediate family, not just, oh, your brother, your mother, your sister, your father. It's the weird kind of relationships that we encounter in the movie. Like we talked about, meeting some random drifter in a diner, and you end up having one of the more, remarkable, profound conversations of your life. Like that's stuff that I find happens not even with the end of the world going on. Some of the most powerful conversations I've had in my life are with somebody I don't know. And so I hope that's what people take away from it, is just the value of relationships, even with people. Because, again, Rose and Michael, like we said, didn't even know each other that well before they started this whole journey together. So I don't think there has to be decades of history for you to care about somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things I'm curious about with the movie is, obviously I had a very limited run this week, and then it's coming on demand next week. What's it like trying to, obviously your dad has involvement with Briarcliff, but what's it like kind of taking your movie, your baby, and really trying to get people to just watch it? Because, today's day and age, a movie, even if it's a big movie, it comes out and a week later, people already moved on to something else. So what's the challenge for someone like you trying to get people interested and talking about this movie?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I would love to talk about it, not just as it relates to my movie, but the industry in general. And like you mentioned, my dad's company is called Briarcliff Entertainment. We are an independent theatrical distributor. We're most well known for doing The Apprentice this past fall. And to your point, it just is incredibly challenging right now. Our old company, my dad's company, was called Open Road, which did Spotlight and Nightcrawler and a bunch of great films of the mid 2010s. And when we were doing those kind of movies 10 years ago, there were like 12 companies doing it. There was us, and there was Weinstein Company and Relativity and Broad Green and STX and a lot of companies, that were thriving in this mid-sized theatrical space of like movies that aren't huge studio blockbusters, but they're not small either. They're gross $30-40 million box office. And unfortunately, that business has just gotten squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And it's funny. Like I love A24. I think they do brilliant work. I think that and I so appreciate how they're some of the last ones doing the mid-sized theatrical. But it's funny to me hearing people of my generation, my age, they think of A24 as this like singular, unique thing. And I'm like, man, like 10, 12 years ago, there was 12 A24s, like it was a thriving industry, and it's gotten so challenging because of the information environment, like we just said. And it's not just movies, like you see it in news, politics, like things move so fast. Our attention spans are so fried. Things that would have dominated headlines for 3 weeks a few years ago now get lost in a half a day. And so it's particularly relevant to the movie industry. And yeah, like a movie like The Apprentice, it has 2 Oscar nominations. It's about, it has famous actors. It's subject matter that obviously everybody is familiar with.
Right.
And even that, it's a huge challenge to get any oxygen.
Yeah.
And so on The Apprentice, I did a little work on the marketing side of it. And I think the answer to your question is like, even for a movie like The Apprentice, which is 100 times bigger than our movie, but it's the same principle of like, it's about earned media, like because of the economics of the business and theatrical companies like ourselves, even on a movie like The Apprentice, are not going to have very much money to buy TV commercials, we're spending dramatically less in the paid media than we did on those movies 10, 12 years ago, because the economics could just afford it. So now it's like, how do we get attention without, paying for a TV ad? So on a movie like The Apprentice, we did a ton of gimmicks. We flew a plane around Mar-a-Lago saying, like, Trump, go see The Apprentice. Like, it's just like stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, I'm very passionate about this. It's about thinking outside the box, and I think in too many movie studios, there's just like a movie marketing playbook that people just like copy and paste, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, this is what you do when you're opening a movie, and your actor goes on Jimmy Fallon, and then you air this TV spot, and you do this, and you just like check the boxes, and nobody's like thinking of outside the box. And the example I bring up all the time is Smile. If you remember the horror movie Smile, obviously it's the sequel. The original Smile, do you remember how they had people go sit behind home plate at baseball games? They would have actors, and they would just flash those creepy smiles on their faces getting picked up by the cameras. I'm like, how much did that cost? Maybe a couple grand for the seat, maybe a couple grand for the actors. So like maybe they spent a handful of $1,000s on it, and they probably got millions of dollars worth of coverage out of that. And so I think that was brilliant. I think that should be the future of movie marketing. And I think all of us who are trying to market our own films or working on the marketing for films that aren't ours should be trying to think of, like, how can we do things like that Smile campaign?
Right.
That to me is the gold standard and what I want to try to replicate with my own films, with Briarcliff films, with anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important too that someone like you, who obviously has his own movie that he starred in, but is invested in a company that really wants to see it be successful, like reaching out to someone like me. Like, I'm a mid-sized creator. I'm not huge. I'm not small, but I have a decent audience. But I think just going out of your way, someone who's starring in the movie, like being like, hey, check out my movie and give me your honest feedback, instead of just being like, hey, say something good about this or else.
Yeah.
I actually lived in Hollywood for 6 years. I went to film school out there. I worked on a bunch of movies. This was in 2005, right after I was out of high school. I was out there, and it was a completely different world. Comic book movies hadn't overtaken everything like they have now. Social media.
I think they're on the way down. I think the new era is on the horizon. But I agree.
I'm actually kind of excited. I watch so many movies, and so many of them are just, I don't even remember them the next day. Every once in a while, a movie will come around, like Sing Sing or something like that, where I'm just like, man, that movie was phenomenal. But what I'm excited to see with a company like Briarcliff is it kind of gives me vibes of like early 90s when indie movies really started to flood the market. And I think it's an exciting time to have an indie movie again. And I think I think trying to build buzz through social media and things that you're talking about is really going to be the way that this industry survives. Because throwing $300 million at the new Red One movie that the quality of the movie just isn't good, it just doesn't seem like a feasible tactic anymore. So I think like having these ultra low budget movies where you have a writer and star who's also helping with production of the movie and behind the scenes marketing of the movie, I think that's really the way that this industry is going to survive. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, because you're in it day in, day out.
I mean, I agree with everything you said, in particular. But then the thing is, also on a movie like a Red One, it's like, sure, the budget's $250 million, but there's not $250 million on screen. Right. Like the large chunk of that money is going to the actors' fees, to the producers' fees, to this, that, and the third, and it ain't on screen. And that's why, it relates back to what we were saying. I don't think you have to have a huge budget to still have some stuff going on. The example I bring up all the time is, did you ever see Good Time by chance, the Safdie brothers movie before Uncut Gems?
No, I didn't. I've seen Uncut Gems, but...
it was the movie before Uncut Gems, similar kind of insanely tense, you're on the edge of your seat every single scene.
Oh, man.
They do a great job with pacing. It's a Robert Pattinson movie, but they made it for, I don't know exactly, if you believe the reports that are online, few million bucks, and it has scope. Like, there is a bank robbery scene and car chases and all of this, and so it's like, that's because every cent that they did have is on screen, and like, so you don't actually need to have a huge budget to still have some production value. And I appreciate what you said, and I agree. I think that with companies like Neon to Mubi, even now with the Substance, like, I do think there is hopefully some sort of renaissance happening in the independent theatrical space. And I hope that we at Briarcliff can be a part of it. And it's funny you said that, like, about the early 90s, it was more so for my dad, the mid-late 90s, but that's when he cut his teeth. He started at Lionsgate, but it
Okay.
wasn't even called Lionsgate. It was
That was
called
back when they were a real
CFP.
big indie, just
Yes, like
indie
my
distributor.
dad was
Yeah.
the first U.S. employee. He was the first Los Angeles employee of this tiny little Canadian company called CFP that would then years later go on to become Lionsgate. When my dad started, a success for them was grossing like a couple $100,000 on like the art house circuit
Hmm.
back when there was an art house circuit. You know, they were doing really dark, really tiny movies, and then they just kind of started stacking their chips, you know, started, you know, and their movies would do 1 million or 2 million bucks. Then they had one or two that got an awards, an Oscar nomination, and just kind of slowly built. It's more challenging to do something like that now than it was in that environment when there was a thriving art house
Sure.
scene. But I do hope that there is a renaissance going on and that we can be a part of it. I certainly think there's the demand for it. That's the ironic part,
There is.
is like there is the audience demand for it. We just need to find the way to best and most efficiently serve them and make that happen. Like the issue is not that people don't want to watch those kind of movies. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you know, I deal with a lot of different film creators and stuff like that, and like I'm based in Texas. I'm not in Hollywood anymore, and one of the things that I think I hear from a lot of people is like, oh, they just don't make good movies anymore, and I'm like, that's really not true. They make great movies. You just aren't watching a lot of good movies. You know, because every time you go to the theater, you're watching a kids movie or a superhero movie, and people are on their phones during the movie. People talking during the movie. You know, it's you're taking out a second mortgage to take your kids to the movie now.
Oh my God,
it's such a headache. And with VOD, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with how movies are putting films into theaters for just a few weeks and then you can get it at home. I know Quentin Tarantino had a big diatribe about this recently, so I'm curious your thoughts. Because for a movie like you, I actually think it's important to do that. It's important to give it its theatrical run, but also to release it at home so people get eyeballs on it.
Certainly.
But when you're a big movie like, you know, Wicked or something like that, like let it run its course and let people give people some time to not think about the movie anymore, let the movie release, and then have people start talking about it again. Like I feel like that's kind of lost now. It's in the theater one day and the next day they can watch it at home. But I think for a movie like yours, that's actually where it's beneficial.
Yeah, totally. That it is. I think you hit the nail on the head. And yes, and I'm very conflicted in many ways as I wear both hats of the creative and also then the studio business perspective. In recent years, the barrier to entry has gotten dramatically lower in terms of filmmaking,
Right.
which from a filmmaking perspective is beautiful in many ways. It's become more democratized, you know, like the equipment is cheaper than ever.
Hmm.
The internet has just made it easy to, you know, get in contact with other people, you know, like 20 years ago, you would never have been able to find other like-minded people to send your script to or to get it on in front of an actor or whatever. The whole process has become democratized in the VOD space and everything. Unfortunately, the flip side of that is that it has hurt the economics of the business because it has created a huge amount of supply, whereas the demand is constant. Like I talk about this all the time. Everybody, because we at Briarcliff are also in a unique situation of being both a buyer and a seller. Like,
Hmm.
we have to buy a movie to release in theaters, but then after the theatrical, we have to turn around and try to sell our SVOD rights, you know, to Netflix or to a Hulu or to whoever to license, you know, we call it our pay one window or HBO, whatever. And so we're a buyer and a seller. So it's weird. It's a buyer's market right now, let me tell you, because, and I'm theorizing, but my view is, especially coming out of COVID when interest rates were low, there was a lot of money being thrown around. You know, a lot of hedge funds, people who made a killing in other industries started entering Hollywood, and there was just a shit ton of independent films being made.
Yeah.
And what I always say is like the demand is constant. Like the amount of people who watch movies and TV shows, thankfully it's never going away. That's great. Like, but it's not really going up or down either. Like it's more or less going to be like this. And then in recent years, the supply went like this.
Yeah.
So of course, you know, it's economics 101. Like the laws would dictate that, you know, it's going to become a buyer's market and the supply has outpaced the demand, which is goes to what we were saying is that's it's so crowded. It makes it harder for any one thing to penetrate. It makes it harder for any one thing to break out and have economic success. So it's challenging.
Yeah.
but it's also beautiful from a, it's never been more accessible to other people, like you just said yourself, being in Texas, like somebody in Texas can easily make an independent film and get some real name actors in it, and so that's beautiful, but it has kind of messed with the economics of the business. So I'm conflicted myself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the other thing too is, once the streaming game and then big companies like Amazon and things of that ilk got into the game, they're throwing huge budget at 6 episode TV shows. Nobody's watching. I mean, some
Yeah.
people watch them, some people don't. Some people like them, some people don't. So it's honestly like, I review a lot of stuff, and it's so hard to keep up with everything. It's
Oh
like
my
I
God.
gotta, I have to limit myself. I got 3 kids. Like I
I know, I
can't.
don't envy you, man.
Yeah, I just can't be. I can't be watching like 100 movies a week.
But
And
I do
I try.
appreciate you, like, and that's why, I did need to just tack on to what you said, like, I, I I think people, you and people like you, are a very, very important part of the new film media ecosystem in a way, and that's why I reached out. Like, I'm some genius for reaching out, but I do think it is a shortcoming of many people on the studio side of the business who don't recognize that. And again, I even at our own company, sometimes even I have frustrations because I'm like, man, it's like I do feel like there's a somewhat antiquated way of looking at media, and like, I don't know if you're on Twitter or whatever,
Oh
but
yeah,
like,
yeah.
like discussing film on
Oh
Twitter
yeah,
and like
oh yeah.
film updates, and I'm like, those people are like driving the conversation online in a way that I don't think most like studio executives, just because they're by nature they're older, they're not as online, they just don't really get it, and they don't really understand that like the value of like an uh Entertainment Weekly exclusive like debut of your clip has gone down dramatically in, in recent years, just in terms of the relevance that that holds. But like we were saying, like that's still what's in the movie marketing 101 playbook,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas actually, if you were to go to a discussing film to launch that clip, like it might actually have much more reach.
Yeah.
And and YouTube channels like yours, like I think are the future of film media, and I think that everyone would be better off recognizing that, because that is how people are finding out about things nowadays. Like
Yeah.
moviegoers, like people who actually watch movies, those are the people we're all chasing in this business. They're watching YouTube channels like yours. They're not going on, whatever, entertainmentweekly.com and looking up the new like, films.
Right, right. And my thing is like I do short reviews on movies, but I also on my YouTube channel in particular, I talk to people like you, smaller content creators. Big, I had a huge YouTuber on last week,
Mhm.
and so it's one of those things where I don't just review movies. I talk about a lot of different things. I'll bring up issues like my last one was like, why doesn't anybody care about the Oscars anymore? Or like why streaming movies kind of all feel like they have the exact same format when you watch them. So that's why when you reached out and had me watch your movie, I saw the trailer first. You sent me the trailer. I said, "Yeah, that looks great. That's totally the type of movie I want to watch right now, just to kind of cleanse the palate." And then I watched it, and I was like, "This has a very indie feel to it, but it also cleansed that palate." It wasn't a movie where I'm sitting there checking my watch the whole time. I'm not like, "Oh, this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen, and then the movie's gonna be over," or they're gonna set it up for a sequel. You very much had a beginning, middle, and end to that movie, but it was one of those like passion projects that you could tell that there was a lot of love and care that went into this craft. And that's the thing for someone like me who watches so much stuff. Like I wanted to be a filmmaker a long, long time ago in a different life. But that's what I liked. It was like I want to just do things that I want to watch. And it felt like this was a movie made by people making a movie of a movie they would like to watch.
Totally, and I appreciate it very much. And
Yeah.
that's all I could ask for. It's nobody. You don't even have to like it per se, but I hope that people watch it and come away thinking that it is different or a breath of fresh air, even if they have particular quibbles with the story or this, that, and the other, because we set out to make something that was a little different than most films of that nature get made, and I think that we accomplished that, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. So how, for someone like you who gets so involved with the movie, how do you, because you have other movies behind the scenes that aren't, don't necessarily have a personal attachment to. How do you deal with like negative criticisms and things of that? Does that stuff affect you, or has social media kind of made you numb?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Like I definitely have pretty thick skin, and one from social media and from growing up around the business. Like
Yeah.
I've seen some shit, I have read some shit, I used to get super riled up, but I still do, man. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, just because ours has not been, you know, super widely seen yet, so I'm sure I will be, you
You'll
know,
get it.
monitoring
You'll
it
get it
much
from.
more
You'll get the plus and
obsessively.
minuses. Yeah.
But I don't take it. I take none of it personally. Like, I don't mind any of it. I don't get offended by any of it. But on certain things, I might very strongly disagree. You know,
Sure.
like on The Apprentice, like I get riled up. I personally, I'm like, I think it is a kick-ass movie, and I think that it's a movie that it's unfortunate that it's been turned into a political football that it
Yeah,
is.
but it's not
Obviously,
a
it was
political movie.
inevitable.
It's not a very political movie at all.
Oh, not at all. It was inevitable that it was going to be. It's not like it's a
Of course,
surprise.
it's the subject matter, but yeah.
But I feel bad for the filmmakers that it has been in some circles reduced to that political football, because just as a piece of filmmaking, I'm like, forget everything else. I'm like, the costume design, the way the production design, the way they capture 70s New York, like the performances,
Yeah.
the score, it's all technically, it's a good piece of film. And so when I read some of the criticism, yeah, I get kind of riled up if some of it I think is stupid or pedantic or whatever. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I've got thick skin and nothing surprises me.
Well, that's good, man. That's good. So I've been actually talking the last few weeks with all the AI controversy kind of going on with the Brutalist and Amelia Perez. I guess has some in there too, some generated stuff. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm curious your perspective on it because I know it's a slippery slope, and I think I was coming at it from more of a traditionalist standpoint where I'm like, I don't think you should use it at all, but
Mm-hmm.
as a small content creator, I kind of lean into it a little bit sometimes. It'll help speed things along. I don't have a big team working for me or anything like that. And some people's argument, in which I see their perspective now, is that it's a tool in making movies. And normally I wouldn't have much of an issue with it if Hollywood would just be more transparent with it.
Yeah.
And the big stipulation with the strikes, a year and a half ago, was their concern with AI and how it's going to be, putting people out of jobs and things of that nature. And now it seems like they're going on to reward these movies for it. I think it just comes across as a big bag of hypocrisy. But I'm really curious from like a smaller, side of things from your perspective, where this is heading. And the other issue I have too with it is I watch so much stuff now, especially so many streaming movies. I'll get sent early screeners or whatever. I'm like, I can't tell if this was written by AI or not now. There's so many things in there that feel very robotic and they hit the same beats. So I think that's kind of putting it into people's heads that AI is really getting involved with a lot of movies, and then you see these award shows rewarding people for it while they're also saying, hey, we don't want to use AI. So it's just this really mixed bag right now. So
Yeah.
where's your head on that these days?
I wish I had a more opinionated answer, because I appreciate your answer of a nuanced answer, and that's kind of my very unformulated view. So my views are subject to change because, to
Sure.
be quite honest, I have not really
It's so new.
fully formulated. Yeah, my thoughts. I've been seeing it all, I've been observing it all, but I have not really actually formulated, because thankfully it hasn't really directly related to anything I've been working on or doing.
Uh-huh.
I just on my gut reaction is to the anti-AI.
Sure.
Just as I'm an old soul, I'm an old head, I'm a curmudgeon. I'm like, I'm skeptical of anything sounding like that. And also, my background too is I used to work as a sports writer
Uh-huh.
way before I, was a screenwriter. That was my day job, which I was able to quit to do this movie. I used to write about sports for a bunch of different blogs and outlets, and then was an editor on a sports betting industry website.
Okay.
And you see it so much in that industry. There's, once great publications like Sports Illustrated and whatnot that have just been hollowed out. They were hollowed out way before AI, just by private equity. But they're now like posting articles that were like written by AI, and it's very dystopian in a way.
Yes.
And I guess my view is probably, if it is taking away a job from another human creative, it is not good. If it is just helping you speed up things that you yourself would be doing anyways, then in that case, I don't see any harm in it. So you're doing stuff for your YouTube channel, like I don't see any harm in. Why would you not want to be as efficient as possible? And so that's why I'm not super educated on the particulars of the Brutalist. If I recall,
was it that I believe Adrian Brody has said that it was just used to touch up some of his Hungarian, but it wasn't necessary. It wasn't taking away a job from a Hungarian dubbing actor, because there is a lot of that too going on right now. AI dubbing.
So there's two things with that movie. The one in particular is that with Felicity Jones and Adrian Brody, they speak Hungarian. It's only when they're speaking Hungarian, and apparently it's a very difficult language to master. So there was just some things where it kind of went in with a fine-tooth comb and really helped them hit those specific things in the dialect. And then the other, like, that one, I'm like, all right, they're like, hey, this didn't put anybody out of a job, you know, that sort of thing. It just kind of helped a little bit, you know, with a fine-tooth comb, master that language. But the other problem was, have you seen The Brutalist?
I have not yet.
Oh, okay. It's a great movie. Yeah. But there's, you know, there's some architecture renderings that he drew. Apparently those were generated by AI. So that's kind of that's one where it's like, oh, you could have used a PA or, you know, someone could have done that job because that's generative AI. And then with Amelia Perez, outside of that whole big, you know, high school drama that's been happening with that movie, the AI was apparently used for Carla, Sophia Gascon's singing voice. It helped kind of mesh her voice to make it sound better. So that's just
like what is the difference between that and like auto tune?
Yeah, you know, that one I'm not an expert in, but I mean, you could have had somebody sing that track with her and kind of merge the two or something. That's where people kind of have the issue with that.
But at the end of the day, I think you're right that the most important thing is transparency.
Yeah, like, transparency is really all I ask. I mean, if they were like, hey, we like it, but we don't want to put anyone out of work, we're just using it for this, this, and this, then I'd be like, okay, you know, that's totally fair. At least you're telling us. But, you know, having this big performance about, hey, this is going to take away everyone's jobs, and then you award people for it, I'm like, okay, well, that just seems really out of touch.
I hear that totally.
Yeah. So what are the next steps for the movie, man? What do you have going on this next week? Because I know that the PR blitz isn't over yet.
Yeah, no, and I think that there's going to be a lot more of it. You know, obviously I've been trying to bootstrap some stuff on myself, reaching out to you and whatnot. But there is a PR agency on board who I know from the distributor. Twitter, shout out those folks. I know have a lot of stuff lined up for this week. I think understandably so. The VOD release is more important to them. You know, the VOD release is what's more important for the financial. The theatrical was very important for us to be able to, you know, to get some initial seeds out there and hopefully get a little word of mouth to get some momentum going for the. But in terms of the ultimate shelf life of the film and how it will be, you know, seen months, years from now, I think that the VOD release is obviously much more important. So I think that that's what they had saved some of their stuff for. So I think we will have some fun stuff. I was told Fandango will be premiering a clip this Friday. That'll be cool. Yeah, so we've got some fun stuff coming up. And then I'm just going to keep also bootstrapping the thing myself, man. I'm like, at the end of the day, if this movie is not seen, it ain't going to be because I didn't try, you know?
Right. Do you have anything that you're working on as well that you kind of want to move to the start line and things like that?
Yeah, you mean in terms of another project?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yes. There is. I've been saying for a while that I'm really going to shift my full attention to it. But I think now that When I'm Ready is finally coming out and I can finally, hopefully in a week or two, mostly wipe my hands. And I think because for a while after making When I'm Ready, just on the exhausting nature of the shoot and all of that, I was very much burnt out. The idea of doing it again sounded insane to me. But as distance has grown, I have been, you know, increasing energy levels, and I think I am definitely catching a second wind, and I'm very excited. I have something that I'm writing that I think will hopefully be, you know, a little bit bigger of a next step, and I can't wait to dive into it. It's going to be another exhausting, brutal slog, I'm sure, but just rewarding, hopefully. If we can.
Do you ever see yourself stepping behind the director's chair?
That's funny. Yeah, somebody just asked me that. I used to think absolutely not. I had no interest. Even when we were shooting When I'm Ready, I actually didn't get that much of the itch during the shoot. But then during post-production is where I really got the itch. Like I think I was saying earlier, I became obsessed with the technical and with the sound design. You know, like I loved the sound work and the scoring of the film is my favorite part of the whole process. So during the
Your score was
post
great,
process,
by the way. I didn't mention that, but I enjoyed the folky indie music and the music in it. I thought was great.
I'm so glad you said that. Shout out Cameron Evans. If anybody watching this needs a composer, I cannot strongly recommend him enough. Would you believe that this was his first time scoring a feature?
No, that's
Yeah.
actually surprising to hear.
We plucked him straight out of jazz school. He's one of those musical prodigies. He can play every instrument. So, like, we would just sit in his garage. He can play the drums, the keys, 6 different guitars. He plays the flute, plays everything. And to me, like, he knocked it out of the park. I think the score in this movie is very emotional and really captures the tone. And so that during that process, I kind of got the itch to direct. So I was like, man, this whole shepherding of it really is what actually draws my interest more so than any one particular element of it. So I kind of do have the itch to direct. Who knows if it'll work out, but I have the itch.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, we can shift a little bit here. So with Briarcliff, it seems like you guys, you're kind of going the A24 path. Your movies aren't as, I guess, A24 has that reputation of being a little off the beaten path, a little bit weirder films.
Sure.
Briarcliff seems like you guys are kind of going for the controversial movies, and I know you got that new one with Jonathan Majors. Yeah, Jonathan Majors. Sorry, Jonathan Majors coming out, and I mean, it looks fantastic. He looks great in it. I know he had kind of a whirlwind of controversy this past year. Is there anything that you guys have, like, internally, a little bit of behind the curtain stuff where you're just like, hey, this dude has basically been blackballed by Hollywood, but I think he's a unique talent, because I thought he was great in the Loki stuff, and Marvel just kind of dropped him like a bad habit. But I think with a talent like that, you don't want to just see that dude out there begging for change, on the 405.
He's a phenomenal actor.
Out there. Yeah, you want that guy out there headlining movies because he has the potential. And that was one of those stories where, like, just on the outside, gossip thing, where I was just like, it sounds very much like a manufactured thing by studios because they didn't like the direction this certain thing was going. But I don't know. I like seeing him on screen. So
me too. We were certainly very fortunate to end up with it. In terms of your question of how much of it is deliberate, strategical, I think some of it, and I think I'm definitely trying to push us in that direction. I know my dad I think feels the same way. At the end of the day, we're running a business, and like in any parody, it's like whatever comes. My dad always says, like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Because people always ask, that's the first question anybody always asks, anybody who's a filmmaker, what kind of films are you looking for? Like, and a lot of companies, like A24 and Neon, like, do have very distinct, like, visions. Like, these are the kind of movies that we do. Us being a small little indie, it's like the deal points either make sense or they don't make sense. And it's like the terms of each one of these deals are very, very different. Like, and so, and actually, I think that's what's cool about working on the studio side. Sometimes I'm like, I do wish we were a little more A24 Neon, having a distinct brand identity.
Right.
But at the same time, I think there's something very cool, and it keeps you on your toes about the fact that, like, this past year, we're going to do a political film like The Apprentice. We are going to do a couple of documentaries. We have an animated kids movie coming out in April. And we have a prestige, Sundance, highbrow, cinephile movie like Magazine Dreams, all kind of, obviously my personal taste are more the Magazine Dreams kind of, prestige movies. But it is cool to be able to work on all of the above, and it keeps every day fresh and keeps things from getting monotonous. And just real quick on Magazine Dreams, it is an incredible film. There's a quote in and just the trailer. I'm like so proud of the team that got that trailer. I'm like, I can't get over it. Like, the trailer itself is a movie. It's a piece of cinema. There's a quote in the trailer that's like an entirely astonishing lead performance from Jonathan Majors. And then when I was finally recently able to get to see the movie, like, that is the most accurate, the most accurate adjective you could use. It is just astonishing. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Like, it is just unbelievable. Like, his performance, like, you will be astonished because it is just. It's just so fully engrossed, and it's just, especially me coming up as an actor, anyone who's ever taken an acting class would be like, oh my God, like, that is the thing right there. Like, that is cinema. So I'm very excited for it.
I'm stoked to watch it, man. It looks great. Well, cool. So, I know you've basically grown up in this around this industry. Where do you see it kind of heading these days? Because I know we talked a little bit about some of the gripes and the issues that it has, but where do you see it heading? Do you think that it's in as dire straits as some YouTubers might make it out to be, or do you think there's no problems at all? Everything is perfect, like some other YouTubers might tell you.
No, I certainly think there's a lot of problems. That being said, I do have optimism. I have a nuanced view, and I also have a anything could happen view. Like
Sure.
I'm not predicting the future, but like I mentioned, it does seem to me like the comic book superhero movie. And again, this is not to say that there should not be any comic book movies or that they cannot be done very, very well. Obviously, they can, but there is just I think it's pretty undebatable that for a section here, they dominated. They became this like overbearing, omnipresent force. They got a few studios doing them, decided like this is where we're putting all of our resources, all in push. We're going to develop 15 shows off of each of one of these things, and you've got to watch them all to understand what's happening in each of the other. And I think that oversaturation of that kind of movie reduced the quality of them all, and also ended up reducing the demand for them all. And so I don't think it's going to be like no comic book movie will exist anymore, but I do think the era of them being the only blockbusters are on its way out.
Sure.
And that's why I was really heartened to see last year the two big, blockbusters being Oppenheimer and Barbie, which obviously both big studio films. Obviously, Barbie is not an original idea; it is based off IP. But at this point, I'm willing to count it. I'm like, I'm willing to count it because it's at least not Barbie 3. It was at least a somewhat, because that movie could have turned out terribly, that's a big risk to take. Making a huge 9-figure Barbie movie, it could have been very easy. It was a risk. It was, I think, somewhat of a risk. And Oppenheimer certainly a risk. And so I think that they're starting to take more risks with bigger budget stuff again, which I think would be great for the industry. And even a movie like which I didn't even see, but Anyone But You, the Sydney Sweeney, Glenn Powell. I was just rooting for that movie because to see a true rom-com do over $100 million domestically was just something that many people had said would never happen again. And it was just a real end. If I recall, the movie only opened to like 8 and ended up doing over 100. It did like over 12 times opening weekend.
Nice word of mouth going on with it.
Yeah, which is insanely hard. The standard rule of thumb on the studio side is 2.5. Like, is that you usually do 2.5 times your opening weekend, give or take. Like, obviously, there's some movies that play, like Anyone But You. But normally, a movie that opens to 8 should do like 20. A movie that opens to 8 doing 9 figures just shows that, like you said, there is the demand for those kind of movies that aren't, blockbuster tentpoles, but are still mainstream commercial films, just ones that have an original concept.
Yeah.
So I'm hardened, and I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, me too. And just from, like my wife she's not the movie fan I am. I introduced her to so many different movies, and I always respect her takes because she's just, I'm so into this industry. Like when I'm not doing this as my side job, like I'm a video editor, motion graphics artist. I'm day in, day out. Like this has been my life, my entire adult life. But from what I hear from most of my friends and people like her is like they miss comedies. It's just and I feel like if there was a studio out there that just went into a comedy, didn't care what people thought about it, if they were offended or whatever, I think it would be huge because the last like really good huge comedy was like The Hangover or something. It feels like it's been almost like 15 years.
I agree.
I know that one of the things is, well, yeah, we live in social media. Everyone, perceives things, they get offended. But the other problem was they became so reliant on like China and these other markets, and comedies aren't big in those other markets. They're only really big in the States. So I don't know. I think if you could find that way to really make a good comedy that gets everybody talking again, I mean, that can really ignite the industry, at least from my perspective. And
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's my favorite industry inside baseball thing to riff on actually is the death of the big budget comedy.
Right.
And actually, it sounds like you already know, but I think most people don't. Most people argue and they're talking past each other, and some people are like, is the subject matter like, has comedy gone too woke? Is it too
Yeah.
PC? Is it not woke enough? Is it? And I'm like, it's none of that. But really, the issue it's an economic thing, and the issue is that you got at that the domestic market is really shit right now. The international market is relatively strong. And so if you think of any movie like a pie chart of like the finances, like, oh, you're expecting to get X% out of the US, X% out of whatever, the international has always been a part of it. It's always been important, but it has become more important because as the domestic market has gotten worse, the international has become a bigger piece of the pie when you're assembling a budget that you need to like account for. And comedy is very cultural. What is funny in Los Angeles, in my buddy Jordan, who's a international sales agent, shout out Jordan Dykstra, he always uses this example because he has to sell movies overseas. He goes to all the international markets, meets with buyers from each individual territory. Like, what's funny in Los Angeles is not necessarily what's funny in Colombia. What's funny over here is not funny over there. That's why, we've seen a lot of the Liam Neeson shoot 'em up action movies. That's why those movies smell like hotcakes overseas, because Liam Neeson's shooting a bad guy with a gun that translates into 92 different languages. Like it translates very easily. That's why I want to make a shark movie. Shark movies sell like hotcakes overseas because if you think about it, there's no more universal language than a shark. A shark is a shark is a shark on Mars, in Africa, in Beverly Hills, wherever. And so comedy, that's what's made it so tough is it's really just the domestic market is just weak. And we need the domestic market to rebound to support those big budget comedies. Short of that, I think the solution is to scale down. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of the heavyweights, the people who are capable of turning people out for a comedy, are willing to scale down, which respect to them. They've earned the right. They have accomplished far more than myself or anybody else critiquing them. But I think that people like Judd Apatow, I think they should make like a $10 million movie, see what happens. I think it could be pretty sick.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be $100 million. And so I think they need to scale down. And also, this is me putting on my studio hat more so than creative. I think they've got to appeal to nostalgia, and they've got to get the band back together. Like you just said, like the one thing that could save medium or big budget comedy would be getting the band back together from like a Hangover. Like if you got Galifianakis and Bradley Cooper, or getting the gang back from a Judd Apatow movie. If you got, they're all off doing their own things now is the problem. If you got Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill and Jason Segel to all be in a Judd Apatow movie, I think that is the one thing that could bring it back. So I hope that happens.
I agree with you too. And I've noticed this resurgence of horror movies, Companion and just all these movies that come out now, and they all turn profits because they're made for like 5 to 10, these really thin margins, $5 to $10 million, and then they don't put much more into the marketing of the movies. So it's like, if you could kind of take that approach with comedy.
Terrifier.
Terrifier. I mean, geez, isn't that the biggest self-financed movie ever?
Yeah, they're printing money.
They're printing money.
Shout out Cineverse.
Yeah, and I know those movies aren't for everybody, but I love them. I'm a big horror movie fan, but yeah,
I have not seen them.
Oh yeah, no, I mean they're not.
I'm fascinated.
My wife would leave me if I had made her sit down to watch that movie. but yeah, comedies are an easy sell. I could say, hey, let's go see the new Adam Sandler movie or something like that, and she'd be like, let's go. Instantly, I wouldn't even need to tell her what it's about. I just say, hey, let's go see the new Adam Sandler comedy. She's instantly
totally. And that's why you see the one thing that is working in that genre is Anyone But You. It's a rom-com. Like the rom of it is important. But those can still kind of work because women and people here domestically really like them, and they're a little easier to sell overseas when you can sell it as a romance film because that still plays well internationally rather than
or even
comedy.
Comic book movies like Deadpool and Wolverine. Like that movie was hilarious. And that was an easy sell for my wife too. She was like, "I know it's going to be funny and it's going to be entertaining, but that's not a cheap movie. That's a very expensive movie.
Sure.
It disguises itself as a comic book movie.
Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
So, all right, cool, man. Well, one thing I would love to ask is what do you have coming up? What's next for you?
Well, for me, I produced the film. It was funny, radically different experience than When I'm Ready, which I wrote and acted and produced and wore many hats on and felt like I personally, I was so emotionally invested in it and I dragged it across the finish line from start to finish. And then this past spring, I had a equally beautiful but just radically different experience producing a film that I was just a capital P producer. I was not in the cast. I didn't write it. It wasn't my script. I was kind of brought onto it because I had just had the relevant experience of producing a movie in LA, and this one was being shot locally as well. So I was mostly just like I said, like it's funny because on When I'm Ready, I didn't know the first thing about physical. On this, I was like the physical guy. I was like, I brought on my line producer. I was the nuts and bolts guy on this one. It's called Nichols. It's if you know Rob Riggle, the comedian, actually, he's in Hangover and Step Brothers and all those
hilarious.
iconic. Yeah, and it's so funny because this movie is a very somber story of grief, and it's I think unlike damn near anything Rob's done before, and he is a tour de force as a dramatic actor. And I really think people who know him from comedies are really gonna enjoy it. The premise is Rob had lost his brother in a motorcycle accident 40 years ago when they were teenagers, and now in the present day, he kind of becomes convinced that his neighbor's son, who's 20, is his brother reincarnated. And so I kind of say it's like a dark Freaky Friday almost. So this 50-year-old man, Rob, and this 20-year-old kid, they start hanging out and they think that they're brothers and nobody else sees it. And the whole thing, it's a story about grief and loss. And the crux of it is, are they actually brothers, or is he just having trouble processing this loss and seeing what he wants to see? And is the kid just a lonely kid who wants some connection? Or are they both just seeing what they want to see, or is it real? Is the crux.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, I think I'm hopeful Briarcliff is the new Neon or A24.
Hell yeah!
Have you guys discussed diving into any horror movies or anything? I know in the industry some people look at it like country music for movies. You know, it's like the easiest way to break in, but there's not a whole lot of that going on.
It's funny that
they are successful.
Well, I don't know. I mean, do you count Werewolves as a horror movie?
Oh yeah, I guess so. That's a horror.
I'm not a horror guy, so I don't know if that counts.
That's fair.
It's a creature movie.
You know what I really loved about that movie was just the prosthetics. I'm so over CGI, man. Like, obviously it's crucial in some parts. I like how Christopher Nolan utilizes it, but seeing something practical like that, like you said, the nostalgia, like it just hits me like a ton of bricks. I'd rather see that.
Yeah, shout out to Steven Miller. He's
a good dude. I've talked to him a few times. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the only thing that we've done that would be construed as horror, but it certainly is not by choice. Like I just said, we are open to anything. Like awesome. I guess just the right deal has not come across our desk yet, but I hope that it does because we are certainly not opposed, and it would be really fun. And I think, like with Smile, I think horror movies are actually the ones that present those kind of guerrilla Terrifier, those kind of like earned media, like you said, not spending a ton on the marketing. I think those are the kind of films that can work. So honestly, I think we should be targeting more of them.
Yeah, my daughter's my oldest. She's 12, and she loves horror movies, and all her friends love horror movies. So like the younger kids are really growing up liking horror movies. It's not like
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is my last spin around my 30s, so I'm almost 40, but. I remember when I was a kid. I mean, obviously there was like the hokey Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but mostly it was like Power Rangers and Batman and Ghostbusters and stuff. Yeah. But the kids these days, they like TikTok, they like those sort of things, and then they like horror movies. So,
wow, that's interesting. That's good to know. That's important data for people in our line of work to be aware of. So.
Yeah, I mean, she and her friends, like every time she has a sleepover with them or something, they're like, we watched a horror movie. They don't really watch anything else. So. Maybe that's how you get the the TikTok generation who has an attention span of a gnat.
Did they have any favorites for your friends? Recent ones?
So I showed her the first Scream, and that's like her jam. She loves the Scream movies. She loved Smile too. I mean, there's parts where she has to close her eyes because she's 12. But yeah, that's her jam, man. She loves those, and she like the first one. I really kind of took her to kind of see how she was with Five Nights at Freddy's. Her and all her friends play those games, so they love those movies.
Do you like horror comedy?
Oh yeah, yeah, I like all of it. Yeah, there's really not a genre I'm not huge into musicals, but every time I watch a great musical, I go, all right, I really like that. So.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's funny because I did realize we did do one other horror comedy. I don't know if you've heard of it. We did the Foo Fighters made a horror comedy.
Oh yeah, the Studio 666.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. I'm like, and man, for guys who had never done that before, I was really, Dave. That was all Dave's vision. He I think is just a huge horror buff himself, and I was impressed with the way he executed.
And he put wasn't Whitney Cummings in it? So like there was some
Whitney Cummings
actors in it. Yeah,
Jenna Ortega actually. It was before she became Jenna Ortega, but she has a small part in it too. So I would love to do some more stuff like that. There's actually on the producing side, not Briarcliff, but on my own independent producing side, there is a horror comedy that I'm trying to help get made. It's very much like the writer of that one. He grew up on Scream and all of those kind of like. It is a love letter to 80s tongue-in-cheek, like over-the-top slasher movies, and so it takes place in the 80s. I like it. I pitch it like it's like Superbad meets Scream. You've seen a ton of like coming of age, like raunchy comedies. It's high school seniors. They're going to different colleges and they're worried if they're going to stay friends or not after that. And they go to the woods to play one last game of flashlight tag, which is what they grew up doing. And then, of course, end up start getting slashed one by one. It's really fun and really fresh. I hope we're able to get it off the ground.
Yeah, that kind of sounds a little bit. Did you ever see the Vince Vaughn movie where it was like Freaky Friday, but it becomes a slasher? I can't remember.
No, Vince Vaughn, the slasher movie. That's something.
Yeah, it was him and what's. I'm blanking right now on what it is. Someone in the chat could probably help me out. But it's great. He's like a serial killer, and then there's some rune or something that it breaks, and he swaps bodies with a teenage girl. So the teenage girl in high school is the serial killer, and Vince Vaughn is the teenage girl. So, trying to get their bodies switched back, but stop from. I
gotta look it up. That's funny.
Stop the serial killer from leaving wreckage out there. I could probably figure out.
That is very cool. I would check it out.
Freaky, that's what it's called. Yeah, Freaky.
Oh.
Came out in 2020.
I did see that.
Yeah, it dropped like in the heart of COVID, so I think a lot of people overlooked it, but it's great, man. It's funny, it's fun, and seeing Vince Vaughn and playing a high school or teenage girl was great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, I know it's Super Bowl Sunday. I know you got a busy day ahead. You gonna watch the game tonight?
Yes, I am. I've never been less interested in the Super Bowl, but
you and me both, man. You and me both. I hate both these teams, so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, do you have?
I feel like it's never been less a part of the zeitgeist. Like maybe it's just me because I'm not interested in myself, but I feel like I haven't seen as much talk about it on the web and everything.
Yeah, all I see are just people like, oh, wonder how the refs are going to win this game for the Chiefs tonight. That's kind of the theme right now is that the refs let the Chiefs do whatever they want.
Exactly. I want to root against the Chiefs, but I can't stand the Eagles either.
Yeah,
so.
I'm right there with you. Are you a Rams fan?
No, I'm more a Chargers guy. Okay. I loved Phillip Rivers growing up.
Yeah.
And I still like Justin Herbert a lot. It's funny, but I just don't feel the same emotional connection that I did when Phillip Rivers.
Phillip Rivers kind of had that blue collar sort of. Just out there trash talking everybody, throwing ridiculous, just gunslinging.
Totally. So I don't know if you remember, he went to the Colts his last year.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So that, honestly, so in the NFL, I'm more a fan of like storylines and narratives I can get emotionally invested in. So. That year, I was a huge Colts fan. Like, I was riding and dying with the Colts just for that 1 year. Then Phil retired, and then the next year, there was a different storyline. I think that I kind of came invested in for that year.
Sure.
That's not what I am for football.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, do you have a prediction tonight? Don't care. I know you don't care.
I don't
All right. Care. Well, let's see if I have any questions from some of the chat. I always forget to do that. But, nice. All right, let's see. Yeah, I got a couple things here. So yeah, so someone asked, did you frequent film sets or engage with business side of Hollywood early on? Were they formative years? Did they solidify your desire to perform?
I certainly engaged the business side just because it's been more or less all me and my dad have talked about since I was 9. Like we would just I've just been obsessed with the business. So I like to joke. I consider myself his consigliere. Just always I wasn't in the rooms making decisions or anything or in any of those rooms. he's in those rooms, and then he would come back, and me and him would talk about it all. So I was just soaking it all in, even though I wasn't actually there as a kid. I visited a few of the Lionsgate sets as a kid. I went to the 310 to Yuma set as
Oh
a kid,
wow,
which
that's
was
awesome.
cool. Yeah, I still have a little like bullet shell casing from that set, which was cool, but not too many. Obviously on the studio side, it's like my dad was not. He was always distribution marketing more so than physical production, even at Lionsgate. So I didn't go to a ton of sets, but I am.
Do you still get starstruck, or are you just kind of desensitized to that these days?
I'm definitely desensitized to it when it comes to Hollywood celebrities.
Sure.
But I get starstruck about like weird stuff that I'm into outside of. What's funny, recent example, I went to the Telluride Film Festival in September. It's a very intimate town. There's like one main street, and there's a lot of big movies and movie stars in town. You run into them constantly because there's literally one street. Like you will see them throughout the whole week, just walking out. There's like one nice restaurant in town. And so I was seeing them left and right. And because growing up around it, I am very non-sensitized to it. I'm like, movie star, I don't care. And then Barry Sheck, the defense attorney who was part of OJ's defense team, if anybody knows Barry Sheck, he walks by me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's fucking Barry Sheck. Because I was such a nerd. I loved everything OJ trial growing up. I've seen every documentary. And I wanted to be a defense lawyer when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
So I got starstruck at that. I was like, oh my God, that's Barry Sheck. He was very flattered that I think he was thinking it was weird because we talked for a while. I was like treating him like he was one of the movie stars. He was just there as a cinephile. He was just there to enjoy films. So I get starstruck about that kind of stuff. But
that's cool, man. I actually have mad respect for that. Yeah, I'm never really starstruck by the Hollywood.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm like, well, they're just people too,
Yeah.
Just the way they're perceived. I remember I had a little part. I was like a little extra on the first Iron Man movie, and I remember being right next to RDJ and Gwyneth Paltrow, and I was like, "This is." I don't really care that much. You see so many people just grovel over it, but I was young at that time. I was in my early 20s, and
Totally.
I never really got that. I'm more interested in talking to people like you who just like have a passion for this sort of thing.
But they say never meet your heroes,
Yeah,
like you said.
that's true.
They're not superheroes. They are just, at the end of the day, regular people, so it might disappoint you if you're expecting something incredibly grand.
Right, and they're not I've had people a lot of time, they're like, you met a lot of actors and stuff. Do you think they ever are the characters they play? And I was like, usually not. That's their job.
Yeah, there are
few. Their job is to go there and be somebody else. So, yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, hey, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for hopping on today. I know you've had a crazy, hectic week. Is there anything you want to shout out? Like follow you on YouTube or Instagram?
You can follow me on Instagram at 4Andrew7. I already probably plugged the movie 20 times, but one last time for good measure. When I'm ready, if you look up our trailer, I'd be curious. Anybody has any thoughts on the trailer or the film, if they see it? Like I said, I've got thick skin. I would love to hear any criticisms, any things you didn't like, please let me know. And thank you so much, Chris, for having me. This was so fun. Honestly, as you can probably tell, I can spiel and ramble about this stuff for a decade. I love talking shop, and I love people who are interested in the film business.
Same here, man. Yeah, I just appreciate you reaching out and making some time to talk, because this is one of my things. I don't want to just be like a movie critic. Like that's fun. I enjoy doing it. I like watching the movies, but I also just like to talk with people and kind of get their perspective on things. Talk a little inside shop. Talk a little how.
I could be wrong. I'd be curious to hear y'all. I'll check out the chat or the comments. Like, yeah, because I think there is the demand from audience too. Like, for the inside baseball stuff in a way, if people can talk about it in a way that relates to the actual movies, that's not just, we're not just talking numbers on a spreadsheet here. Like, we're talking about the business side of the business, but as to how it relates to all the creative and to the movies that they love. And I think people actually do like hearing about that stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things before I let you go, I was curious about is with the indie market kind of rearing its head and companies like Briarcliff and Neon and A24 coming up, is it as unionized as it used to be, or are you guys kind of doing the non-union, kind of going that path with things, because it sounds.
Sorry, you mean for the shoots themselves?
Yeah. Because it sounds like you were, obviously you're the writer and the actor, then the star in it, but it sounds like you got your hands dirty. You're helping the gaffers, you're helping the grips. You're back there getting your hands dirty and things. How is that kind of shaping up these days?
Honestly, I can't speak too much to it. Just at Briarcliff, we are mostly I am hopeful to get us into more of our original productions. That's why Nichols, the Rob Riggle movie that I just shouted, that was actually an original that we actually produced and financed. For the most part, though, since we're a new, younger company and we've just been focused on acquiring finished films, so, movie The Apprentice, we bought it after it played at Cannes. We were not actually involved in the production of it. So, I can't say what the actual choices were. Werewolves, all of these movies we acquired as finished films. So what the actual work dynamic on set was not something we were in too much control over.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fair. All right. Well, Andrew, let's do this again sometime, man. I'd love to have you on anytime you want to promote anything, or if you just want to, just talk some shop. Maybe you saw a cool movie.
Always on talk shop.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're ever in LA, Santa Monica,
absolutely, yeah. If you're ever down in Dallas, or even if you do something like South by Southwest, give me a shout, because I usually.
Oh, I would love to. I've never been to South by. It's been on my list for a long time.
Yeah. Are you born and raised in LA?
Yeah, I was born in Santa Monica, grew up here. I've actually mostly been living in New York for the past 12 months. But I've just been subleasing kind of short term. I still
back and forth.
LA will always be. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. I miss LA sometimes. I miss the weather, especially when it gets like 105 out here. But I don't miss that traffic.
Are you in Austin or?
No, I'm in Dallas. Dallas. Yeah, so I've been out here for.
Are you going to South by this year?
Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah, I'm going to be at South by this year. So, and I've done it a few times. It's cool. Austin's a cool town. You ever been?
I went to Austin once. Yeah, I went to a UT football game. That was super sick, but it was during the fall, so couldn't make it to South by. But it was cool. I went to Austin and San Antonio. That was my only time in Texas.
Well, keep growing that company, man, and you'll probably be in Texas a lot.
Thank you. I hope so.
I know they're trying to. I know Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey and Dennis Quaid are really pushing to make Texas like new Hollywood. So
that's. I hope they pass the Texas incentive or something. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's tons of land out here. So anyway, Andrew. Well, hey, man, I can't thank you enough for hopping on. I appreciate it. Everybody, go watch When I'm Ready. It's I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan. It's not sci-fi, but I'd say it's more like a rom-com thriller, rom-com. Yeah. So anyway,
potpourri.
What's that?
I said it's a potpourri. It's a little
potpourri. Yeah, a little sprinkling here and there. But anyway, Andrew, thanks so much for hopping on, and let's chat again soon, man.
Sounds great.